Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unraveling what is, without a doubt, the greatest unsolved hijacking in American history. Seriously, we're looking at a story that feels like it was literally ripped straight out of a tense Hollywood thriller. But the wild part? Every single detail we're covering today actually happened. We're talking about a masterclass in tension, a completely daring escape, and a literal ghost who just vanished into thin air. So let's step back in time and piece together the absolute enigma that is D.B.Cooper.
Okay, set the scene in your mind. It's November 24, 1971, Portland, Oregon. It's the afternoon, right before Thanksgiving. You know the vibe. Travelers are frantically rushing through this crowded airport terminal, totally desperate to just get home to their families for the holiday. Outside, there's this heavy, relentless rain hammering against the airport windows, and the skies are just incredibly gray and uninviting. And right in the middle of this chaotic holiday rush, history is quietly walking right through the front doors.
And this is who walked in. Just a totally ordinary-looking guy, dressed sharply in a black business suit, his polished shoes echoing on the floor. He's got these dark sunglasses on, hiding his eyes, and in one hand, he's carrying a small black briefcase. Because he looked so utterly normal, he was practically invisible. Honestly, no one noticed him, and nobody even remembered speaking to him. But within just a few hours, this totally anonymous guy was going to trigger one of the most legendary manhunts America has ever seen.
So he strolls right up to the ticket counter and casually buys a one-way ticket for Northwest Orient Flight 305, heading up to Seattle. And on that ticket, he writes down a super simple name, Dan Cooper. Right at 2:50 p.m., the Boeing 727 takes off into that dreary sky, engines roaring as Portland disappears below the clouds. The rest of the passengers are just kicking back, completely oblivious to what's about to go down. Meanwhile, Cooper is sitting dead silent near the back of the plane. He orders a bourbon and soda, lights up a cigarette, and just stares out the window without a single ounce of emotion.
Well, just a few minutes into the flight, Cooper hands a folded note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. Now, at first, she just smiles politely. She totally assumes it's just another passenger trying to slip her his phone number, right? So she just drops it into her pocket without even looking. But then Cooper leans forward and very calmly utters the words that would change everything. "Miss, you'd better read that note. I have a bomb." Suddenly, time just stops. Her hands are visibly trembling as she pulls the paper back out to read it. But the craziest part? There's no anger. There's no panic in his voice at all. Just calm, precise instructions as he motions for her to sit right down next to him. Without uttering another word, Cooper slowly, deliberately pops open that small black briefcase on his lap. Inside, Schaffner sees several red cylinders, all intricately wired together and hooked up to a battery. Now, was this thing real or was it a fake? In that moment, it didn't matter one bit. The absolute ice-cold precision with which he showed it to her made one thing very clear. Nobody on that plane was going to test him to find out. His demands were incredibly calculated, and they completely shocked the authorities on the ground. He wanted exactly $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck gassed up and waiting for them the second they landed in Seattle. And the stakes? Plain and simple. If anyone tried to mess with him, he'd blow the plane. As the aircraft started circling in a holding pattern above Seattle, it was absolute chaos on the ground. The FBI is scrambling. Banks are rushing together stacks of $20 bills, with agents frantically photographing all the serial numbers. They're trying to track down parachutes, all while negotiators are just pulling their hair out trying to figure out who this guy in the back of the plane actually is. Finally, the plane gets the green light to land in Seattle. The second those wheels touch the tarmac, police absolutely swarm the runway, lighting up the darkness with blinding floodlights. And then, a literal miracle. One by one, every single passenger walks off that plane safely. Not a single hostage is harmed. Once the plane is clear, Cooper takes the heavy bags of ransom money. But get this, he just calmly accepts the bags without counting a single bill. He doesn't even check the cash. It was almost like the money wasn't even his main goal. With the fuel loaded up and the hostages gone, he gives the crew one final chilling order. Let's fly again. Their destination this time, Mexico City. But before they even take off, Cooper lays out the series of highly specific, totally bizarre instructions for the pilots that left these veteran flyers just staring at each other in disbelief. Check this out. 1. Fly below 10,000 feet. 2. Keep the plane unusually slow. 3. Leave the landing gear partially lowered. 4. Do not pressurize the cabin. And 5, which is the absolute kicker, leave the rear staircase of the 727 operational.
Every single one of these steps was methodically calculated for exactly one purpose.
So the Boeing 727 lifts off again, heading straight into a violent, pitch-black storm. Heavy rain is just absolutely lashing the cockpit windows. You've got powerful, turbulent winds shaking the entire aircraft. Lightning is flashing across the sky, giving these brief, terrifying glimpses of the endless, unforgiving dark forests way down below. And back in that dark, unpressurized cabin, there's only one solitary passenger left, D.B.Cooper.
Up in the cockpit, the crew is understandably on edge. Between the roaring engines and the howling storm outside, they can't hear a thing from the cabin behind them. They are totally isolated from their hijacker. That is, until a warning light suddenly blinks on their instrument panel. It's the indicator for the rear staircase. It's been lowered, opening straight up into the freezing, violent winds of the night sky. Just seconds after that light flashes, the pilots feel something they simply can't ignore. The massive aircraft suddenly lurches upward, like hundreds of pounds of weight have just vanished into the dark in an instant. But over the intercom, nothing. There's no radio message, no scream, no cinematic final goodbye. Just heavy, total silence. Somewhere high above the freezing, treacherous forests of Washington state, D.B.Cooper actually jumped out of a commercial airliner into the dead of night, with $200,000 strapped right to his body.
By the time the plane finally touches down at its next stop, authorities immediately rush the aircraft. But what they find is just eerie. The cabin is completely empty. The rear stairs are just hanging wide open, having dragged behind the plane. The massive bags of ransom cash, gone. And Cooper, gone. The guy simply vanished. What happens next is immediate and massive. We're talking the largest manhunt in the history of the FBI. Military helicopters are sent up to meticulously scan miles and miles of that dense Pacific Northwest wilderness. Federal agents are trudging through treacherous rivers, scaling mountains, and combing through thick forests and cliffs. Hundreds of seasoned investigators are thrown onto the case, eventually interviewing thousands of potential witnesses and suspects. The sheer scale of this search is honestly just staggering.
And after all that, nothing. Despite the choppers, the agents, and the full weight of the federal government, they find absolutely zero physical evidence. No body in the woods, no discarded parachute tangled in a tree, no black briefcase. They didn't even have a clear set of fingerprints to tie back to any known suspect. It was literally as if the earth just opened up and swallowed the guy whole.
So, years roll by without a single sign of the hijacker. The trail goes completely cold. Then, flash forward to 1980. An 8-year-old kid named Brian Ingram is just playing, digging in the sand along the banks of the Columbia River. As his hands dig into the dirt, he uncovers 3 bundles of rotting $20 bills. Investigators rush to the scene, check the serial numbers against their master list, and boom, every single rotting bill is an exact match for the ransom money. This discovery completely shocks the country and instantly reignites the entire cold case.
But here's the thing, finding that money didn't solve the case, it actually created a maddening logical paradox. Think about it. If Cooper actually survived that completely impossible jump, why in the world would he leave behind the exact money he just risked his life to steal? But, on the flip side, if he died on impact, where was the rest of the $200,000? And way more importantly, where was his body? Every piece of evidence just seemed to contradict itself.
This wild paradox literally split experts right down the middle into 2 camps. On one side, you have investigators who are absolutely convinced Cooper was an elite military paratrooper, a highly trained operator who calmly pulled off one of the greatest, most calculated escapes in human history. But then, on the other side, experts argue that no experienced skydiver in their right mind would ever jump into the freezing darkness of a violent thunderstorm, carrying heavy bags of cash over completely unfamiliar mountain terrain. They think he was just an inexperienced, doomed amateur who never survived the fall. But without a body, neither side can actually prove their case.
For over 50 years, investigators relentlessly chased this ghost. They followed hundreds of incredibly promising leads. They looked at former soldiers. They interrogated professional skydivers. They chased down rumors of criminal masterminds and even investigated ordinary businessmen who seemingly led double lives. And while every suspect looked perfectly convincing at first glance, every single theory eventually collapsed under scrutiny. Ultimately, the FBI had to officially close its active investigation into the skyjacking to focus resources on other cases.
But, you know what? The public's fascination hasn't faded one bit. We're all still left staring at this final, enduring question. Who was D.B. Cooper? Was he a hardened, calculated criminal? An unrecognized military genius? Just an ordinary guy who somehow pulled off the impossible?
Or did he just vanish forever into that violent storm, taking the greatest unsolved mystery in American history down with him? To this day, somewhere out there beneath the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, the truth might still be waiting to be found. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I'll see you next time.